we look at what's happened at Gaza, but what Hamas did was an act of war, and it was barbaric. And Israel had to retaliate in some shape or form.
Whatever was done to Israel on October 7th, nothing whatsoever could justify a genocide.
Ever heard the expression, the $1 million question? Well, the question is a most valid question, which we dare anyone to answer it. Okay, comes October 7, Israel is attacked in the most barbaric, savage way that we haven't seen since World War II. The question is, the $1 million question is, what do you expect Israel to do? How would you expect Israel to respond? If this would have happened in any of America's border cities, how would America have responded? How would have Europe responded? That's the $1 million question. Well, let's listen into this interview as this question is being posed. And let's watch this together, and we'll discuss it afterwards. Kindly subscribe to this channel so that a little bit of light will push away a lot of darkness.
This is a difficult question to ask, but I feel that it needs to be said. The events of October the 7th were vile, awful, and you cannot justify that in any shape or form. Not to say that you are, I'm just saying that we both agree on that. What should Israel have done afterwards? Because we look at what's happened at Gaza, but what Hamas did was an act of war, and it was barbaric. And Israel had to retaliate in some shape or form. So I guess my question to you is, if you were Benjamin Netanyahu, what would you have done?
I am not going to evade questions. So do not take what I'm about to say as a diversion. And you're absolutely free to press me and press me and press me. But I do have to convey how I see the question.
Of course.
Your question to me has to be preceded by what I would call an antecedent question, which is, what did you expect the people of Gaza to do? What do I mean by that? So,
well, look, let's not get into that for this reason, because in terms of having this discussion, let's accept when we had Bassem on, for example, this was the nature of the debate we had, right? He was saying, well, what do you expect the Palestinians to do? And I said, let's accept that while they're uprising, as Francis said, you called it, I think, a prison outbreak. Let's accept concentration camp outbreak. Let's say that that's what it is. Nonetheless, the fact is that Israel exists. Israel was attacked in this barbaric way. Let's say that the Palestinians have every cause to try and free themselves in this way. I don't know how killing and raping civilians does that, but let's set that aside. That still leaves the question of, what should Israel do in this situation? It still leaves that question on the table. So let's say, without going into the detail, just for time reasons, that we accept everything you say about the suffering of the Palestinian people. Nonetheless, on top of that, what should Israel do in this situation?
I have pondered that question.
Okay.
And I recognize that to say they should have done nothing except to end the illegal and inhuman blockade of Gaza, which Richard Goldstein described as elements of a crime against humanity, to immure 2 million people, half of whom are children, in what Israel's head of the National Security Council, Giora Eiland, described as, quote, a huge concentration camp. What your British economist, before October 7th, he described as Gaza as a human rubbish heap. the Secretary General of the
No, let's say we accept all of this, just for the sake of argument. Let's say we accept all of this.
I recognize that question.
Okay. So what's the answer?
My answer is, first of all, on one level, it's a little late in the day to be asking that question. But asking it, you can still make the argument that whatever was done to Israel, if you, for example, look at the South Africa application, it begins by saying what happened on October 7th was horrible, awful, terrible, so on and so forth. It said, and I'm quoting it, paraphrasing, whatever was done to Israel on October 7th, nothing whatsoever could justify a genocide.
We can talk about that separately, but what should they have done?
I don't think it's so easy.
That's not answering my question. That's the only reason I'm interrupting you. As I think you've observed, we're fair interviews. We've given you lots of time to answer questions. So my question is, what you've described about what's happening in Gaza, what you've described about happening in Gaza prior to October 7th, let's, for the sake of argument, let's just say that that's all the case.
I agree with you. I think that's a fair question.
So do I.
I've wrestled with that question.
So what should Israel have done?
I would say that I'm not trying to divert. There's two concepts in international law, jus ad bellum and jus in bello. Jus ad bellum basically means who's the aggressor, who's the defender, okay? That's jus ad bellum. Jus in bello is how you conduct the war. And you have to conduct the war according to what we call IHL, International Humanitarian Law, the laws of war. That's conducting it. I would say if Israel's, I'm not going to say which side is right and which side is wrong. That's jus ad bellum. I'm not going to discuss it. Jus in bello, I would say if you're going to carry out a war, even if it's a war of aggression, let's say you believe Russia's engaged in a war of aggression against Ukraine, it's still bound by the laws of war. And even if Ukraine is defending itself, it too is bound by the laws of war. So I will say I'm going to separate out the question of who's right and who's wrong.
Yes.
And I'll simply focus on then the laws of war. And I would say whatever Israel does, whether it's right or wrong, it still has to obey the laws of war. But Israel is carrying out what, what the International Court of Justice described as a plausible genocide.
So just so I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, are you saying that what Israel should have done is retaliated and destroyed the organization that attacked Israel?
No, I'm not saying
You're
that.
not saying that?
No.
So what should they have done?
I said if they choose to engage in
then they
war,
should follow the rules of war.
then they have to follow the laws
But
of war.
should they have retaliated? Should they have attempted to take out Hamas? Should they be trying to kill the people who attacked their people?
I would say I cannot accept those judgments, the ones you just rendered. I understand them, not necessarily your judgments, but you're telling me.
Yeah.
Should they have? No, I can't accept those judgments because it's like, for me, I'll just give you the closest analogy I can. When the events of October 7 happened, the first day, it was unclear exactly the magnitude of what had occurred. The numbers were being given where 50 Israelis were killed. It wasn't clear if they were combatants or civilians. And it was only about, you would say about the third or fourth day, it was clear that a crime of significant magnitude had occurred. Atrocities of a very significant magnitude had occurred. By now, the figure is about 850 civilians were killed. That's a significant crime by any standard. There's no question in my mind about that. Even if you allow for collateral damage and this and that, no, there's something very substantial that occurred there. And then I had to ask myself exactly the question you asked. What should Israel have done and how do you allocate, so to speak, more responsibility? Let's leave the legal question aside, more responsibility. And after thinking about it very hard, the what resonated for me, what seemed right for me, was to see it in the terms for myself as an American, in terms of the slave rebellions. And if you look at, for example, the Nat Turner Rebellion in 1831 in the United States, if you look at the details, it was very ugly. You know, Nat Turner, he gave the order to his Confederates, kill all whites. That was the order, okay? And they went from house to house, and unlike in Gaza, they did behead babies. They took out an axe, chopped off the head of babies, cracked skulls, killed about 61 whites. The rebellion was repressed very quickly. And once I felt that seemed like a fairly reasonable analogy, then the question for me became, how did the abolitionists, those who opposed slavery, how did they react to Nat Turner's rebellion? And it was very striking to me when I read, for example, the editorial by William Lloyd Garrison, who was one of the famous abolitionists in our country, where he wrote an article in the periodical of the abolitionists called The Liberator. And he began by saying, and this I think is responsive to your question, he began by saying, we told you so, we the abolitionists, we told you so, we told you so. And he said, we told you, if you demean these people, degrade these people, humiliate these people, exploit these people, rape these people, if you do that, then what happened with Nat Turner was inevitable. And then.
But we've already built that into the argument. No,
Right.
no, I'm sorry.
But he never said. Remember.
Listen, let me explain to you where I'm coming from, okay? So that I think
allow me just to complete
we're
the
just
thought.
talking past each other.
No, we're not. Allow me to complete the thought.
Okay.
If you read the Liberator article, editorial, he never says the U.S. government should have retaliated to Nat Turner.
Understood. Okay. So his argument is probably, you got to free the slaves, then none of this happens.
That's correct.
Fine. Let's accept that. However, do you honestly think that a leader of Israel is in a position after the biggest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust to say, you know what we should do in reaction to this is free the Palestinians, whatever that looks like. This is never going to happen, right?
Correct.
And I'm interested in living in the real world, as I think you are. If you care about the lives of Palestinians and Israelis and everybody else, that means there has to be some kind of way of resolving this that is based in reality. And in reality, whatever way you look at it, you've got two tribes that absolutely hate each other with good reason for both sides to hate each other because there's been atrocity against both sides throughout history. You may argue about who's responsible and blah, blah, blah. Reality on the ground is this is where we are.
Yes.
So my question is, how should Israel have reacted in that situation in the real world? In the real world.
Right. And I think I have responded to you, but you can, of course, quarrel with me on that. And
I am quarreling with you.
As I said to, your name is?
Francis.
Francis. You can press me and press me and press me.
I'm trying.
Yes, and I will accept that. My answer is what I've said before. What in the real world should the Palestinians have done if they tried negotiations, they gestured to supporting either a two-state settlement, here I'm referring to Hamas, or what they called a hudna, a long-term ceasefire, when in beginning March 30th, 2018, they tried, not least because of my encouragement, they tried nonviolent civil resistance. And what was the Israeli response? We know exactly. There's a 250-page, single-spaced UN report describing the response. Israel took its best snipers, lined them up along the perimeter fence, and while there was this festive, to use the word of the UN report, atmosphere among the Palestinians, there was music, there was dancing, there was song. the snipers, I'm quoting the report, intentionally targeted children, intentionally targeted medics, intentionally targeted journalists, intentionally targeted disabled people. They described double amputees 300 meters from the perimeter fence that Israel shot. When they didn't kill them, they targeted them from the kneecap down to inflict, to use the technical term, life-changing injuries, which for the layperson translates as paralyze them. One Israeli sniper boasted to Haaretz newspaper, Israel's most serious newspaper, he shot 42 kneecaps in one day. 42 children and adults paralyzed for life. And so when all the options of diplomacy, nonviolent civil resistance, when they've been exhausted, what were they supposed to do?
We've already accepted that. For the sake of this argument, I've said repeatedly, let's accept everything you're saying about the plight of the Palestinian people. None of what you're saying, though, is going to solve what's going on.
Yeah, well, to solve it, I would say you have to use the convention. I'm not, by the way, just to clarify, even though in our conversation before the program began, I said I belong to the Marxist tradition. I see myself there. I'm not a radical on these subjects. If you can hear me through this whole conversation, I was just quoting international law.
I'm not suggesting you're radical.
So I'm asking is,
I just don't understand how he could justify October 7. I didn't get it. He's saying, what else should the Palestinians do after everything they have been through? They've tried diplomacy, they've tried this, they've tried that. They've tried nothing. They've only tried to terrorize Israel. And he's asking, well, what else should they do? Then just commit October 7? Like, it's okay. It's ends to a means. I mean, this is so absurd. And to say it with a straight face is just absurd. Palestinians have had 5 chances of statehood. 5 times over the last 77 years, they were offered statehood, and they turned down every single one of them. Most recently, just 20 years ago, on August 15, 2025, when Israel evacuated from Gaza, not one Israeli was left in Gaza. They left their homes, their neighborhoods, their synagogues, their industries, their workplaces. When Israel was there in Gush Katif, built up beautiful neighborhoods. People were living beautifully side by side. When they left, when they were expelled, once again, the expulsion of the Jews of Gaza, the Palestinians had a great opportunity to build this city into a state. Let that become their capital. Let that become a city where they can live. They could have villas, they could have schools, hospitals, shopping center, malls, resorts. It's on a coastal, beautiful coast. They could have built beautiful resorts. It could have been a great Riviera right there. But instead, they chose darkness. They chose to become a death cult. They chose time after time after time to turn down any opportunity of statehood. It's because it's not that they're looking for Israel. That real estate in Israel is tiny, smaller than New Jersey. That's not what they were looking for. They were looking to get rid of the Jewish people. They were looking to get rid of the Israelis. They didn't want Israel in the Middle East. It's as if they own the Middle East, as if they belong there. No one else belongs there. And that was their mandate. That was their goal, is to get rid of Israel in the Middle East. So for him to say, oh, they've tried everything, what else do you expect from them to do? What kind of response is that? When the question was, what is Bibi Netanyahu supposed to do? What is Israel supposed to do after it faced the most barbaric type of massacre at war, an attack of war since the Holocaust? What is Bibi supposed to do? Well, Bibi Netanyahu did what every other country did, just a lot better, and a lot more sensitive, a lot more careful in trying to prevent as many civilians as possible. What is the answer? The answer is when the moderate Arab countries are able to come together and finally recognize after 77 years that Israel has the right to exist. And then the Arab countries put down the law of the land that no Arab shall fight Israel anymore. That war is over. Israel is here to stay. Let's work together like the Abraham Accords that was worked upon during the first term of President Trump, which hopefully will be jump-started yet once again. It was so close with Saudi Arabia that Hamas could not bear the fact that Saudi Arabia may have diplomatic relations with Israel, that they launched October 7 to prevent that from happening. Let the world realize that we, Israel, the Jewish people, are coming in peace. We want to have diplomatic relations with all of our neighboring Arab countries. We want to work together. Do you know what life was like before 1979 with Iran? Could you imagine? Prior to the revolution, 1979, Israel and Iran not only had diplomatic relations, there were airplanes flying non-stop from Tehran to Tel Aviv, back and forth. Universities exchanged students, engineers exchanged ideas, doctors shared medical challenges together. Iran and Israel were working side by side, hand in hand. Imagine the brain power between these two countries were able to accomplish. Until 1979 came with the revolution of the extremists, Islamists, and turned that country into a living hell, holding hostage the 9 million, the Iranians that are there, and not giving them a chance to live in true liberty and freedom. So let's pray and we hope that we realize people who with a straight face can say, what do you expect the Palestinians to do? They have no other choice. That's a fallacy, that's a lie, that's a myth, that's a narrative that doesn't exist. Palestinians had 5 times opportunities for statehood. That's not what they want. Hopefully, this war will be the last war. This will be the end of the fighting in Israel. Let's hope that when this thing ends, when the hostages are returned and the Hamas is neutralized, that the Middle East can start recuperating and recovering. And once again, the Abraham Accords would be reinitiated, jump-started, and peace will be amongst all the Arab countries with Israel, because Israel comes in peace, and we'll be able to really, truly support each other, complement each other, embrace each other, eventually have open borders, and learn how together we are stronger in this whole world. God bless you. God loves you.